The 5'9" Heisman Trophy winner was considered too small to be a successful quarterback.
Can a guy who's 5'9", 175 pounds make it in the pros?
Yes, he can. But it's a matter of ability and not size.
But the resilient, athletic, and dynamic playstyle of Doug Flutie led him to become a fan favourite. In John Madden's own words, inch for inch, Flutie in his prime was the best quarterback of his generation.
Doug Flutie is a natural, and naturals come in all sizes. He's instinctive, he's mobile, he can focus downfield and throw an accurate ball.
Doug Flutie was doubted and held back simply because he was not tall enough for his entire career, but he wouldn't let that stop him. At just under 5'10", his height was viewed as a disadvantage, to say the least. It didn't seem to matter what he did on the field, nobody could look past it. Now, I'm going to make you go insane if I keep saying he was doubted because of his height, but keep this in mind going forward. Anytime Flutie was dismissed or disrespected, a big reason for that is going to be because of his height. Saying all that, Flutie was a winner at heart. Despite a solid high school career and offers from smaller colleges, Flutie wanted to play D1. The only problem is there was a lack of offers coming from those schools. Well, not a lack, none. But Boston College would come in at the last minute. As a freshman, he was at the bottom of the quarterback depth chart. But in just 6 weeks, he was able to get to the starting role. Not the first time he'll prove everybody wrong. In Boston's 4th game in a blowout, Flutie was given a chance. And underwhelming, he was not. Down 38-0 against Penn State, he passed for 135 yards and a touchdown. That was all he needed to do to get the starting role. In his sophomore year, he was still a bit inexperienced and he threw 20 interceptions. That being said, they finished 8-3-1 and he led Boston to their first bowl appearance in 40 years. By his junior year, he was fully in his element, finishing 3rd in Heisman voting, throwing for over 2,700 yards, 17 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. In 1984, he'd follow that up by winning the Heisman, throwing for 3,454 yards and 27 touchdowns. Both were school records. Now that season was full of top-tier highlights, but the most notable moment came in the final seconds of a shootout against the Miami Hurricanes. Down 45-41 with 6 seconds left, Flutie tosses up a prayer.
Flutie flushed, throws it down. Caught by Boston College. I don't believe it. It's a touchdown. The Eagles win it.
They'd go on to win the Cotton Bowl, and Flutie clearly left his mark in college football. By the way, if you're new here, welcome. This is NFL Unveiled, and if you like old school football, you're in the right place, because that's all we talk about. Now Flutie had a lot of success. Obviously he won the Heisman, but he also finished number 1 in passing yards all time with over 10,000. That being said, there was a real lack of interest. I don't need to tell you why, right? So he opted to play for the New Jersey Generals in the USFL. His 5-year, $7 million contract made him the highest paid rookie in all sports. Given the USFL draft was months before the NFL draft, by the time the NFL draft came around, he already had signed with the Generals. So that led him to becoming the lowest drafted Heisman Trophy winner, being selected in the 11th round as the 285th pick by the Rams. His first 2 career passes in the USFL were both intercepted. He dealt with some injuries later in the season as well, but he did finish the year with over 2,000 yards and 13 touchdowns, as he led the Generals to a playoff spot. But the USFL would fold before the 1986 season, and the Rams traded their rights to Flutie to the Bears. He only appeared in 4 games, and wasn't that popular amongst some of his teammates. Most notably, Jim McMahon, who called him America's Midget and Bambi. McMahon got injured that season, but he felt the other 2 backups deserved a shot, and not this outsider coming in. Flutie's most important game for the Bears came in the divisional round against the Redskins. In just his second start of his NFL career, he completed just 35% of his passes for 134 yards, a touchdown, and an interception in a 27-13 loss. Not the greatest performance. By 1987, his time was up. The Bears traded him to the Patriots. Starting 1-3, Flutie took over during the 5th game of the season. He came off the bench and orchestrated the comeback against the Colts with a game-winning touchdown in the 4th quarter. He then led the Patriots to a 6-3 record. But then, for whatever reason, with the playoffs in sight, head coach Raymond Berry demoted Flutie to the bench, stating that the team needed more explosive play on offense. Well, they lost the game and therefore missed the playoffs. To rub salt into the wound, after the season, a coach on the Patriots would call Flutie and say, "There's a mini camp at the end of the month, but you're not invited." That's absurd. First you bench the guy only to have it blow up in your face, and then you cut him. After being released by the Patriots in 1989, and with no other NFL teams interested, he opted for the CFL. Sure, at this point, his stats were not out of this world, but he wasn't getting much playing time, and clearly needed time to develop. Before joining the CFL, he only started 14 NFL games. He'd first signed with the British Columbia Lions, then later played for the Calgary Stampeders, followed by the Toronto Argonauts. In Canada, he'd finally get some love. Flutie was a great runner on top of the passing, and with the longer and wider fields, he was able to put his abilities on full display. He was also great at improvising when the play broke down, and because there were only 3 downs in the CFL, you're throwing a lot more. After a 6-11 season his first year, Flutie would not have another losing season in the CFL. In 1991, the following year, he'd set numerous records. To name just a few: passing yards, passing completions, and rushing touchdowns by a quarterback. In 8 seasons, he won CFL's Most Outstanding Player 6 times, led the league in passing 5 times, won 3 Grey Cups, and won 3 Grey Cup MVPs. He'd become a CFL legend. A 2006 poll named him the greatest player in CFL history. By 1998, he was ready to give the NFL one more try. He basically completed the CFL, there's not much more he could do, and he knew he could still excel in the NFL. I know it's the CFL, the level of competition is not the same, but even saying Flutie dominated the CFL is kind of an understatement. He mastered it.
We are seeing the greatest player in CFL history at his best.
He was so far ahead of the competition that while it may have been a lesser league, we can't totally dismiss it. And what further solidifies this point is what he did when he came back to the NFL. He's playing in the CFL during his prime, his late 20s to early 30s. He's 35 when he signs with the Buffalo Bills, and he played well, so a 35-year-old playing good football would only be better 5-6 years earlier. Despite the dominance in Canada, he was not guaranteed the starting role yet again. The Bills had traded for Rob Johnson in 1997 for a 1st and 4th round pick, and he'd also get a $25 million contract. With all that invested into Johnson, it seems like the Bills created this competition when there clearly should not have been one. But Flutie made this clearer than any argument I could offer. After Rob Johnson got injured, Flutie came in off the bench, threw 2 touchdowns in a 4th quarter comeback against the Colts. That year, 1998, he made the Pro Bowl and won Comeback Player of the Year. He took the Bills from a 1-3 start to a 9-3 finish, as well as a wildcard berth. He threw for 20 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, and rushed for 248 yards and a touchdown. Let's not forget, by this point, he was already in his mid-30s, and played almost a decade of football in the CFL. As a defender once said, he's 37 and he's scrambling around like he's 25. You've got to respect that. So the Bills had a strong year, right? Flutie's probably relaxing, thinking he's got the starting role locked up. Well, going into the 1999 season, coach Wade Phillips named Johnson and Flutie as starters on the depth chart. I'm sorry, what? Flutie would brush this off, leading the Bills to a 10-5 record. With 1 game left, they locked up their playoff spot, so Johnson played the final game. Then, right before the playoffs started, the Bills decided to start Rob Johnson instead. Coach Wade Phillips later revealed that owner Ralph Wilson forced him to make the change, and the Bills lost in the infamous Music City Miracle against the Titans. I'm not going to sit here, actually, I'm standing. I'm not going to stand here and tell you Flutie was the best quarterback in the league. But when you have a guy who's winning versus a guy who can barely stay healthy, why would you not go with the winner? The way it's always been for me in the NFL is that I'm a risk for a personnel director. I don't fit the mold. If they take a chance on me and fail, they also fail. He'd also be the last quarterback to lead the Bills to the postseason for over 17 years. But the Bills couldn't see that bleak future ahead, so after the 2000 season, they cut him. Off to the Chargers this time. 2001 was his chance. He finally had the starting role locked up. But the Chargers went 5-11, although he did throw for a career high in passing yards. Now, an up-and-coming rookie you may have heard of was giving him a challenge. Drew Brees. Flutie became a mentor for Brees, and by 2002, he was the starter. In 2005, Flutie spent his last season in the NFL with the Patriots, and on January 1st, 2006, he'd convert the first dropkick since 1941, one of the rare sightings of Bill Belichick smiling. In his 12-year career, he only had 3 seasons playing 10 or more games. He would still rack up over 14,000 yards and 86 touchdowns. The man played for 21 years. In his teammates' own words, it's because he's still trying to prove himself. He's still trying to shove it in their face and tell them, no, I can play this game. That chip on his shoulder is what kept pushing Flutie. It's what stopped him from giving up. He had to prove all the doubters wrong, and I think he did.